So, it's the first day of classes, and you're asked the basic introduction questions we all know. What's your name? What's something unique about you? And what are your pronouns? You panic. What should you say?
Today, our topic of discussion will be on the history of gender-neutral pronouns and how they contribute to our society's willingness to change. But before that, we're the STEMs. My name is Ryan, and I'm joined by my well-informed co-hosts Makenzie and T. You are tuning into the first episode of our new series called The Best of Web Media, where we deeply explore issues that may affect college students like yourself. We hope that this chat will heighten your curiosity and allow you to form your own opinions. T, you want to start us off today?
Sure, thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Just wanted to share with you that recently I read an op-ed by Christina Xiao that touches on the topic of preferred gender pronouns, more commonly referred to as PGPs. She asserts that PGPs are not yet ingrained enough in our culture for people to state them unprompted.
Oh yeah, I read that one too. So the quote you brought up would be good to discuss because though our progress with trying to add preferred gender pronouns is slower than people might want, and it's fair to say that public controversy is completely normal for any change, it doesn't mean we haven't tried at all in the past.
I mean, yeah, look, change takes time. We can't expect people to change overnight, right? Like, you wouldn't be happy if you woke up one day and your parents were like, you know that thing you do every day? Yeah, we aren't doing it anymore.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't be too happy myself, which is why it is taking a while. I mean, after all, this is a big change. And for a long time, we tried to and are still trying to integrate preferred gender pronouns into our language. Journalist Michael Waters wrote an article for Wired about this said history. In short, Waters wrote that as early as the 1600s, people who did not follow the traditional gender norms were called they and them in medical notes.
That's interesting to know, considering how heavily people disagreed with the LGBTQ+ community's ways back then. I mean, the community has been facing hate for hundreds of years.
Right? That's why some people have been trying to weave such communities into everyday language. Like around 200 years later, people came up with 200 to 250 more pronouns. And in the following years, even more were introduced, like here, hisser, and himmer, and thon, the condensed version of that one. All of these pronouns were mainly to refer to both men and women at once. Ryan, anything you would like to add?
Absolutely. So the thing that I like to think about is that people adapt over time to change. We can relate this to the Ms. versus Miss versus Miss idea. Remember the author we mentioned earlier?
Waters.
Yep, it was that one. He mentions this very idea in his article. So to give some context, back in the 1950s, when marital status was becoming a bit of a controversial topic, women started to implement the basic title of Miss to keep their marital status confidential. At first, people were undecided on this new idea because most were confused about why women would want to keep something as simple as marital status private. But later on, we started using the term more, and eventually, most of the population became accepting of it. And now, it's like we don't even think about using it twice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. T.
Yeah.
I see that there are a lot of different pronouns to identify binary people, but what about for people who are non-binary? Are they just left in the dust?
Very good question, Makenzie. This did become an issue in the community. That's why later on, an English journal called Urania proposed that gender is not just either male or female, and introduced the idea of identifying as transgender or non-binary.
So, speaking of moving towards more gender neutrality, they and them has become more popular as of late as a gender-neutral pronoun for the masses to use. Ian Ayers, a professor at Yale Law School, in an article for the Washington Post, talks about how he has created a practice in his classroom where every person, student, and teacher is referred to as they until the persons in question become more comfortable over time.
But isn't they already a part of our language, but with just like a different meaning?
That is true, and T, you do bring up the point that reintroducing an old term with a new definition, seemingly out of nowhere, might be harder than you think. There have been other examples in different cultures we have seen where the majority of the population shunned the idea of adding more gender-neutral terms until, over time, the use of those specific terms became more widely accepted and eventually became a part of their everyday vocabulary.
Regarding your last statement, Ryan, have the terms they, them been accepted into our English vocabulary in terms of their new meanings?
So, surprisingly, not yet, as at the moment, most of the population is not used to these pronouns. We can relate this back to the idea of Ms. versus Miss versus Mrs. The majority of the population started using it more often once it became more mainstream, but not before facing tons of backlash and criticism.
Mhm.
The gender-neutral pronouns they and them are no different, as most of the population has not accepted the use of these terms up to this point in time.
Wait, are you suggesting that some people are starting to kind of jump on the bandwagon to avoid being judged? Like, if a person doesn't understand new slang, they feel like an outcast?
Not quite a bandwagon tea, so I just kind of want to clarify that what I meant to say was some people are more open to change than we think,
Okay.
but it just takes time. People can learn as long as they put in effort and are willing to change. Just like they can learn new slang, they can pick up new pronouns just as easily. So, in a sense, making mistakes is part of the natural process of adjusting to change. Isn't that right, Makenzie?
Right, exactly. And since you mentioned change, I wanted to add that different languages sometimes have gendered terms. An example that I can think of is the Swedish language. Former reporter for Newsweek and author of a New York Times bestseller, Adam Rogers, mentions in his article that at first the term han referred to males and hon referred to females. In 2012, hen was introduced to the Swedish language as a non-gendered term. The question did arise about whether or not this term would actually stick, or if it would be thrown out the window like many other attempts before were.
Well, did it get thrown out the window?
Actually, no.
Huh.
It definitely faced some backlash at first. People were not happy, and a newspaper even went so far as to ban it. But it was actually accepted by the Swedish Language Council itself and is fairly used in the current media. It almost proves what Rogers says. It's almost certainly true that time sands the edges off of new syntax and grammar.
Now, we do have to get the obvious out of the way. Not everyone is going to change. And some might even attest that it might be a less painful experience for those who conform to change than for those who resist it altogether.
Sure.
But, like Waters and Rogers both mentioned, there is a lot of trial and error to integrating certain pronouns, just like there is to making any change, especially something as old as the English language.
So the next time you sit in a classroom and somebody asks you what your pronouns are, would you be honest? Would you even know the truth yourself? At the end of the day, it's up to you to figure it out.
If you're interested in learning more about anything we discussed today, there will be links to the articles we referenced below. Thank you for listening. Make it a good day or not. After all, it's up to you to determine.